Hello, everybody. Here is the Wisdom Factory with Conscious Living, Conscious Dying, the series I'm doing for the memory of my husband, Mark Davenport. And I'm here together with Claire Davenport, his daughter, and Mihai Portak, who is the husband of the other daughter who died 5 years ago. So we have to share some experience in illness and dying and accompany people who are in severe conditions. And we want to inspire you not to leave the people alone who are in these severe conditions, but we can do something to make their life easier and their death easier. But on the other hand, we don't want to hide that it is also difficult. But at the end, I think it's for me, I cannot speak for you, I'll leave it to you later. Being there for the person who dies is also a gift. We are growing, we are learning something more about life and can appreciate our life in a different way. So I'm Heidi Hörnlein. I was the fourth wife of Mark Davenport, and we lived together almost 7 years. And it was a great time of our lives. He came over to live with me in Italy, and he died in Italy on 30th of June, exactly 3 months ago, 2018. And with that, I give over first to you, Claire.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm Mark's daughter, and I was invited here today to speak about, I live in San Francisco. I am a high school special education teacher for the past 11 years. I work with students with what's considered to be moderate to severe disabilities. And so, and a lot of that actually, I think, ties in with this conversation. But I just wanted to say that I'm grateful to have this conversation, and I was also grateful for the opportunity, no matter how difficult it was to care for my sister during her final weeks, and that we were able to follow through with her wishes to be with us as long as she could, and also to just sort of talk about some of the narratives we have about what it means to be at end of life, and how a lot of the fears that we have around a lot of fears and the misconceptions, or I think just giving an alternate view of even though you may deteriorate towards the end of your life, that there can still be a lot of dignity in that, and a lot of valuable time spent with loved ones, and also just to be honest about how difficult it is and the things that you wish you knew before they happened. So you could have been better prepared for that experience.
Yeah, thank you. We will talk about that during the next hour also.
Okay, yeah, I didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so Mihai.
So I'm Mihai Portak, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've gotten to know Mark very well because I was married to his daughter, Lilian, Claire's sister, and sadly Lilian passed away a little over 5 years ago from breast cancer. And we were married for almost 7 years, I'm thankful to Heidi for inviting me to share the experience, because I do think that there's that the experience of being close to somebody who's dealing with um, a, a grave disease or is seriously ill is something that most people will have to deal at some point in life, or it's likely will, but nobody wants to think about it or even talk about it. So I'll gladly share my experience and how it was to care for Lilian, to be with Lilian through her journey, through her diagnostic, and all the way to her passing, and how was it to also cherish her legacy and think about what has left after her physical being expired on Earth.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. I want to ask Claire, how much were you involved with your sister? I know you were there at the end. And were you from the beginning when she got the diagnosis? You were far away. So how did you take it when you heard that your sister has cancer?
It was difficult for me, but I think because of Lilian, I remained mostly optimistic. But it was quite a tension for me being in San Francisco, her being in Chicago, and so the best that I could do was come for a long weekend, every other month or so, and then I was there permanently for the final 5 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, when she began to enter hospice. And so what was really difficult for me was that my life here in San Francisco was, I had a lot of responsibility as a teacher. I had a bit of a difficult personal life going on, and where I had wished that I had freed myself to spend more time with her. And so it felt that it was a difficult situation for me because being here in San Francisco and being someone who takes care of people for a living, but really wanting to spend my time caring for my own, that felt like and that I couldn't figure that out, that definitely was a big tension for me, trying to just meet my responsibilities. And so it was quite difficult, but we were very, very close, and we communicated a lot, and yes, but it unfortunately, no, I wasn't there as much as I would have liked to be.
Yeah, but you were there at the end in the 5 weeks, you said, and 5 weeks can feel like an eternity, isn't it true?
It certainly was. It was because of just the nature of the condition and her condition. It was 24 hours a day, between mostly myself, Mihai. We had a lot of help from Mihai's mother. We had a lot of help from our cousin Jocelyn, and we had periodic help from friends and family. But for the most part, it was back to back to back, 24 hours a day. Someone needed to be fully accountable for her.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that, sorry to interrupt, that those last final weeks, Lilian needed attention 24 hours a day. She could wake up from she couldn't be by herself. She couldn't stand by herself. So she could wake up in the middle of the night and try to move and hurt herself. So somebody had to be on guard 24 hours a day. And it was thankful to Claire literally living and with Lilian and I, and my mom was also there. That was the only way I could possibly keep going to work and basically have a break for myself, because as the disease progresses, you keep trying to do the same to keep up with it, but there's a point where, at least for us, there was a point when I had to admit that this is I can't do, even with somebody hiring somebody during the day, it was really hard to keep up with watching over and providing or keeping tabs on all the medication. So that having Claire and Mom there was very helpful for me to catch myself from being overwhelmed.
Yeah, I was there with Mark until a short time, because before you came, Claire, and a little bit I had an insight in the condition of Lilian, and I so admired you, Mihai, how you were there for her. You were so patient, you were so loving, so almost crying when I think about that back. It was, I thought, how can you possibly do that and not be overwhelmed, and what strength you must have to be able to do that, the strength of love probably, and also, as a human being, the strength of the heart. I really, really, really admired you for that. And I'm grateful that you were able to do that.
Yes, me as well. Very grateful. It's beautiful to witness how much you loved her.
I remember to see you once when we came from the window. We saw you both dance. How gently you moved her. I mean, she already was not really very good on her feet anymore, no? So it was really great. And you in my eyes, at least to that point, later I don't know, but to that point, you succeeded to see her as your wife and not as a child to be taken care for. And this is really, wow, really.
No, she's always been my wife, even as she was so devastating to see her in the final weeks and not be able to say words and just see her capacities diminish. But I've always seen my role as when, and it wasn't just a role, but when you get married, it's for better or worse. And I know she would have done the same for me. It's my philosophy. We were so close, and we understood each other so well that it just came natural to try to soothe her existence. And she was going through a hard time, so it's like anything else almost didn't matter at that point. That's what I was trying to give her. When we moved to the new apartment, and that wasn't just like, it was a gift for both of us, and the family helped a lot. It wouldn't have been possible without Lilian's side of the family all helping us arrange the new apartment. Zach paid for the movers, her brother, and so it was we were trying to give. She wanted not just to live through the summer and have another summer. it's amazing how little you want when you realize that mortality is real and it's near. All you want is just another healthy summer, for example.
Yeah.
That's what Lilian wanted.
You reframe your time, you know, it becomes smaller and smaller. And I can really relate to that when I did care for Mark, and also to what you said about it comes natural. And we were talking also about that, but I very clearly said, yes, I do that, and I love to do it, but I'm not sure how far I can go, because I don't know if I have the psychological and also physical strength. I don't know if I could have done a year or so. And for you, it was, I think, more or less a year since it was really the hope went away. Or tell me a little bit about that. How was the illness circle or cycle?
Well, Lilian was diagnosed. She was just a little over after turning 30, literally a month after when she started doing investigations. So, and it was sadly, cancer in young people can be very aggressive, sometimes more aggressive, or usually more aggressive than in older age, when it's more common to to think about cancer. So her initial diagnostic was pretty advanced, as in it was definitely a stage 3, but she had a lump in the neck, which I knew that meant that it's gotten outside from the breast. So it means it's not very, I being from Eastern Europe, I guess we're always bracing for the worst. So, so the initial diagnostic hit me really, really hard. I remember just realizing that what we might be dealing with, and that this could be a journey to the end, and that's when the priorities change instantly. I remember for me, but at the same time, I right away sprung into action. I started calling doctors. I was a student back then, so I had a little more time, and I didn't have a full-time job to go to. So you spring into I started reading about it, started calling doctors, setting appointments, working through insurance. But that took a very heavy emotional toll. That's because I wasn't really sharing my being scared with anybody. I remember who I shared it with was my mom, and I just burst out crying because of all the tension that's been building inside me, and I was scared to tell Lilian. I felt like it wasn't Lilian I should be going to tell about how scared I am for her and for us. And I found support in my mom, but I think it's important for everybody who is in that support role where you are you're basically expected to support your loved one, and it's really it's important to also find an escape for yourself. That's what I found. So throughout, find a good friend you could confine in, find a therapist if you have access to one, where you can say your deepest fears. So it's the experience of caring for Lilian that taught me that that's a necessity. Because initially I tried to be tough, and then still eventually all these buildup of emotions, they overwhelm you, and you burst out crying when you don't expect it. But I think it's healthier to realize that it's normal to have those scary thoughts, and it's normal to talk to somebody about it. I mean, eventually with cancer, even I could talk to Lilian much later when it became obvious that this may be the end, that the cancer might win, and it was easier to talk to Lilian about how life would, how life would go on after she would pass, and that in a way made it easier for me, because I was able to share my thoughts and fears with her, and is also, and I didn't feel guilty for when we were, in a way, we were on the same wavelength. I didn't feel guilty for taking hope away from her, because initially I would always feel like I can't tell her my fears, because it would mean I would, I would take away something from her being hopeful, for her being optimistic.
Yeah, I think this is really a dilemma in which we are in, no? And especially when there is still hope, then sharing that you might fear that she doesn't make it. In our case, I mean, she was so young, no? And you would believe a young person should make it, no? In our case, Mark was already 76, and we were very clear about dying, because when Lilian passed, we did a lot of research and spiritual teachings about death and dying. And he was very involved in that, in preparing himself to the idea of dying because of Lilian. And he was really very devastated by that. He didn't show it, but I knew he was, also by the idea that she was leaving. But in our case, we talk quite openly about dying. And yeah, I think it's also because when a person is in that age, it's much more, sort of expected. But of a person of 30 years, you would like to try to keep them up. But I know that there are many people, and here the doctors don't tell directly to the patients that they have cancer. The doctor told it to me, and I said, wait a minute. I brought Mark in, because, I think people should know what it is about. It depends on how you say it, but at least not give them total illusions, because in my opinion, they also need the time to prepare. And I hear what you say, that you had at the end the time of preparing, after you had found the right moment to say that, and have also worked through your own fears, That's great. Yeah, thank you.
And it's really sad that the doctor wanted to tell you, because I feel like when the doctor puts the burden on you, the wife, and it does two harms. One is it assumes that the patient is better to live in ignorance and rather than knowing what's going on, and it also places this burden on you to know, but then tell them, or it's and I'm saying this because I don't know if this is older wisdom. My dad also passed away from cancer, colon cancer, and when they diagnosed him, they told my mom, and they didn't tell him, and I can only imagine the burden on my mom, because I was 18. No, I was 17. He was 18. I was 17 and I was the oldest, and then my brother was 15, and my sister 12. So tell a mother with 3 children that she's gonna likely be widowed soon, or and now she has. I think the doctors were being very unfair.
Yeah, it is.
It's sad that I thought this was maybe Eastern European bad medical system, but maybe it's some sort of philosophy and some maybe outdated.
I think it is the fear of death also of the doctors, because they don't want to handle it and they leave it, push it away and give it to somebody else to take care for the psychological part of that. I would like to ask you, Claire, when did you first talk with Lilian and she was clear that probably she would?
Well, you know, we weren't always that direct, and so I was more struck by her coping mechanisms, and what how she seemed to have this very full life, even though you know, she had been at home already for a year. And so you know, how much she engaged people still on the internet, and how much she still was trying to learn all the time. She got really preoccupied with learning about you know, other areas in the world where there were tremendous hardship. You know, she started reading a lot about the plight and watching documentaries about North Korea and all these sort of things. And these things filled her and got her through the hours and the days. And she also told me that one of the things that she would fantasize about was being a kid again. And so part of her fantasy world, while she was ill and she was at home and spending her time, is that she would indulge in the fantasy of being born again and being a kid again, and to be parented and cared for. And so it just really blew my mind, because I only saw her really break down only a couple times, and for the most part she kept moving forward, and so I just, you know, she really had a strong idea about how she wanted to be sick, how she wanted to address her illness, how she wanted to seek out knowledge, how she wanted to try new things, commit to diets, and commit to all these vitamins and nutrients and supplements and lifestyle changes, and even continue to eat partake in this healthy lifestyle, even after, to the point where we weren't really sure if it was benefiting her at all. But that sort of taking care of herself in that way meant something to her, to just eat, to just be really nutritious and to be as healthy as she could. And so she had a lot of her own agency in that way, in the process, when, you know, so much is out of your control and so much of your identity is being stripped from you, you know, piece by piece. You know, first it's sort of the physical ailments, and then sort of things start changing with sort of hormonally, and your moods and your libido and your ability to be, you know, feel like a woman, and then, you know, then it's more things, and then it's sort of your memory, and little by little, you know, you watch the cancer take pieces of her away, but she remained, you know, sort of her personality and her agency, and a lot of her desires, you know, she was able to keep intact for a long time. And one, you know, and her desire to be wanting to spend as much time with Mihai as possible. That was her wish. All she wanted, you know, was more time, as much time as she could get. And I've been reflective on that as, you know, you talk to other people sort of casually sort of having this callous, or no, I think it's legitimate that people feel this way. But they feel if I'm ever getting to the point in my life where I'm deteriorating so much, that I don't want you guys to, that I would rather die than wait until let the disease run its course to the end. And I think that's a common fear that a lot of people have, and it just wasn't the way my sister felt about it at all. And granted, by the time that her cognitive function was really impacted, she didn't have a point. At that point, she wasn't able to decide if she was okay with that or not. But I think that us getting used to this as humans, that, we are not our bodies, and that when we are transitioning and then when we are passing over, like, our body is going to change and be different, and that we're leaving that behind, and that is that's normal, and that's okay. And so, and I know I see this reaction in other people who have someone close to them who is dying from whether it was suddenly or been over time, but there's a progressive illness that ends in death, which is, there's just family members who can't be there. And there's loved ones who can't, they can't process the sight of this person anymore, because their physical is so different, right? And it pains them too much that they don't even go and spend as much time as they should or can to see their loved one in that condition. And so, and I understand that. I just feel differently about it because I work with people who have significant disabilities, which has taught me so much about, the way your body functions at this particular point in time is not who you are. And it actually really informed me a great deal on how to best be a helper and a caretaker to my sister, as certain functions, both physical and mental, certain functions began to deteriorate. It was actually something that I actually understood and had ways to address or to work around, or I just had familiarity. It wasn't as, every time there was this progression, it wasn't as profoundly devastating to me. It was like, okay, this is the next phase. This is what we have to do now, and Mihai and I, and we just really strove, all of us, to take really great care of her and keep her clean, change her clothes, continue to give her liquids, make sure that she doesn't get a bed sore, stay up with her all night. And that was what we wanted to do. But I don't think, but it did almost break all of us. And I don't expect the average family to be able to withstand something like that, especially when you just get, family members in a room, and we all have our own issues with our different family members. And now we are trying to put in all this physical labor and emotional labor around a person who's dying. I mean, I think that it's not, it would take, I would imagine it's a tremendous challenge. And I understood, and I even had the same sentiment at times where it was, Lilian, it is time for you to go, and wanting it to be over before it was over. And so those were definite feelings that I even had, even though I was willing to stay there and put in all those hours with her. And because what we weren't really prepared for is what nobody really told us about was what those final days would be like. And with the sort of, no one had told us about the anxiety disorder of dying people, where there is this tendency to never want to sleep, and there's this tendency to want to get up all the time, and it's just this internal base drive to do that. And so this is things that we were coping with that nobody kind of told us about until finally long down the line, we got some help for that, like a couple weeks too late. But, and so there were things that I think people could have prepared us for that would have maybe spared us how much hard work it was. But I would just want to, if anything more, I want people to not fear when the person is at that point in hospice care. We can't fear what their bodies look like and how their bodies are functioning, and that's actually a natural thing. It's a natural thing for us to leave our bodies behind eventually, and that if we can get more comfortable with that idea so that we can spend those last moments with people.
Yeah, that brings me to the topic. You said if they had told us, and I had the same experience here, people don't tell you what is important. You are sort of left alone on your own decision. And that brings me to the topic that what is it, what do the helpers need? What help do the helpers need to be able to do that? Because I think in our society, it's also a reason what you say that people don't want to stay with their loved ones because they get overwhelmed and they cannot make it. But isn't it also because we don't get enough help? And what help would you have needed, both of you? I first asked Mihai. You already talked about your mother who helped a lot, but also you talked with a friend and so on. What else would you have needed also from the point of view of society to provide for you so that it is easier for somebody to stay like you and you, Claire, to stay with the person they love without this complete overwhelm and burnout, maybe even, when it takes too long?
I'm trying to go back because the whole period that Lilian was ill, because she was ill 2.5 years, so, and there were different levels of help that was needed. For the most part, we were self-sufficient. But the last 6 months, of course, things took a turn. They were very hard, and things took a turn for the worse. It's the first stress. The first stresses, unfortunately, in the U.S. are financial. We were worried. For example, Lilian didn't have health insurance when she was diagnosed, so I had to basically just launch myself at the internet and trying to get all the information I can about how to get health insurance, how to solve to take the financial stress away, but not the financial in the sense of at that point money becomes more of a means to an end, to where I wanted her to have access to the best quality care at the initial stage of just even care. So the U.S. could do a lot better at giving people access to doctors. That would have, just having somebody informed to talk to who could tell you what you need, rather than try and figure out by myself on the internet. That would be number one in the U.S. I don't know how that works, and maybe in other societies health system works better, but
yeah, we here in Italy, the care is the hospital or the doctors are for free, but it takes a long, long time. Mark got his first chemotherapy after the first time he really felt ill was the 1st of April. He went to the hospital for 10 days for the researches, which is free. But, he was there 10 days and he came out, and then he still had to wait for the results. And the first chemotherapy he got, I think, the 4th of June. So 2 months later. And, you know, if you have an aggressive cancer, maybe it would be good to have it a little bit earlier, you know. So the financial thing is regulated, but the how do you say, the organizational thing is not working well. And as I said, the information is not working well. There was one doctor for this, the other for that, the other checked this, the other checked this, and the family doctor only wrote the recipes, how do you say, receipts for the medicines. But there was no uniting thing, and nobody who could tell us what is important. For instance, when he got so much pain and had to take morphine, nobody told us that might be obstipation of that. So I didn't know, and then he suffered such a lot on that, which is useless suffering, you know. Pain in the shoulder was heavy enough, and then when he sat down, he said he felt like a sword going inside of him because he couldn't get that out. And to figure out what we could do, you know, until finally the doctor said, "Oh, you could do that," and I said, "Thank you." Maybe a little bit before was helpful, you know. And so also me, I had the feeling I had to figure it out all myself. For instance, when he did the chemotherapy, this day he was great. And then I asked the nurses in the hospital, I asked them, he was at home in the evening, but when the next time we went to the hospital, I said, "How is it that the next day he felt so bad again?" And so, and she said, "Yeah, he had oxygen." And I said, "Oxygen? Couldn't we get oxygen too at home? You know, nobody tells us that you could have it at home, you know," and I didn't know. And so I had to go and organize that, you know. And I always was in this fear that I didn't figure out the things in time, you know, and always I had the feeling I ran behind the facts, and I couldn't save him from many of the pains because I didn't know, you know, and I had to figure it out, and maybe I did something wrong even and hurt him more with that, you know, in some way. Then it is a difficult situation as a helper. So
yeah, certainly. But there were throughout the period throughout my journey, and in a way, Heidi, you had I've had similar experience to what Heidi had, where yes, nobody warns you about the side effects, and then when you tell them, the doctor's use as well, everybody reacts slightly different. But the once we took the health insurance stress away, which thank goodness there was a program in Illinois that was giving health insurance for pretty much if you were qualified based on income, basically didn't make money, which we qualified because I was a student and Lilian was self-employed, and you were diagnosed with either breast or cervical cancer. Well, no, breast or ovarian. So it was geared towards women's health. You qualify for state health insurance, and that was in a way a blessing once we got it, because that gave us access to care and took what I called the financial stress is more of the stress of having access to quality care and being able to afford it. Once that stress was taken away, albeit with delay, because of course there's bureaucracy nobody tells you about. Then what I found helpful was I found out that the hospital actually did give access not just to Lilian to a therapist, which Lilian used and liked, but also to me, which initially I didn't use, but eventually I realized that it was a good resource and that it was helpful for me to talk not just about the stresses of the disease and caring for Lilian, but also focusing a little bit about on me, because I was last year of grad school. I would have wanted a good job. I should be looking for a job, and that's also a stress. I identify a lot with what I do or where I work, so it was double hard to care for somebody and at the same time have to decide what do I put time into, development of my career or caring for my possibly dying wife. So a therapist was very helpful. And then in the final months, the final 6 months, as things get harder and harder with everyday life, there is a point, I think, in every caretaker's life, somebody caring for somebody whose condition deteriorates, there's a point where you have to admit that you, one person, can't do it all. And lucky enough, I had enough support around me to where I almost didn't have to ask for help. There was always help available. I just had to admit to myself that this is more than I by myself can do, and that's when we got somebody to stay with Lilian during the day, caretaker, and then eventually Claire and Mom came, and Grandma Pat came, and Heidi and Mark came, and there were other people around to help even in the evenings and preparing for Jules and Colin were preparing meals, and Jocelyn and Naomi and Zach. So that's also, I mean, it was hard for me to admit that going back, because you want to do it all yourself, but it's also, it's not a matter of pride here. It's just, it's so much to deal with that one person just can't do it all.
No, that's true. That's really true. So what I'm now interested in is to know, how was it when she finally died, when the moment of the transition? What were your feelings? What came up for you, and also the time afterwards? How did you cope, both of you?
I had, we had gotten, there was a nurse who had been there earlier in the day and, had told us any minute now. So quite a few people had assembled. And so, and there was, this crying out in the room of no, not yet, no, not yet. For me, I remained relatively, I think, peaceful because I had been there, and because I had, because I had been preparing for this. I was devastated, but in the moment, it felt peaceful, and it felt like she was free. And so, I actually ended up being the one who did her hair and makeup for the funeral, for the wake. And so I had actually spent about 3 hours late at night alone in the funeral home with her. And so, and this was just sort of an extension of the nature of our relationship, being sisters who are only a year apart, and how doing each other's hair and makeup was just something that we'd always done, and that I was the one that she had trusted to do that. And so So I had already spent a long time alone with her before anyone else saw her body. So I had spent a long time with her body. I had had my own private moment with her body. But at the end, for me, at the end of the long ordeal, there was great sadness, but there was also relief. I also felt an immense amount of love for having been able to be there for her. But then I think that afterwards, the actual, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Mihai, or if you feel this way, Heidi, but I do think that there was definitely some post-traumatic stress from that 5 to 6 week caretaking time. I do think they were pretty abnormal and super intense situations, just sort of compounded by grief and lack of sleep. But it was something that I had to recognize as that I was different after. And that I had been changed, and that life was going to be different now.
And can you say more about this different? What was different?
I think that there were things. I mean, I changed. There were things I stopped doing. I became a more private person. I became more interested in my own self preservation, and I would think more significantly, because I had been through this experience and then had come back to return to my normal world and the people in my normal world, there were just things I was no longer going to do. There was ways I was no longer going to spend my energy doing emotional labor for people in the way I'd done it in the past. So I just felt that I had been through so much that I was done. And so any sort of caretaking responsibilities that I had in my personal life, I felt that I didn't have to do them anymore. I didn't have to deal with any sort of drama, any sort of people that were going to deplete me in any sort of way. So it was really that after that experience, I became, and I still to this day, cautious, risk averse, and like really about conserving my own spiritual, emotional, psychic energy for myself. I think is definitely on a way that I'm different now.
What I'm hearing is that you are preserving that for yourself in the sense that you don't want to waste it on people who are not really in need, but who try to get it from you, and instead of taking care for themselves,
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So in that way, I mean, it definitely was something that was necessary.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing, really, not to be eaten up by people who want to eat your energy instead of growing up themselves.
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mihai, and you? How was it for you?
You see the message?
No.
He says the computer is having a problem. He needs to restart. I think he's frozen.
Okay, I see him frozen, yeah. So in the meantime, I can tell about me. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't expect Mark to die so early, because I thought it goes a long way, as I knew from other people. And we connected, and I told you, when you don't have to come right now. It will surely last until you have finished teaching in the middle of, what was it, July or something. I really wasn't aware that it was so near. On the other hand, he really had so difficult condition because he had to get up in the night about 12 times and also during the day, and always with oxygen. He couldn't stay without oxygen anymore. So it was hard for both of us because sleep was not really a whole lot. And then he tried to save me and go by himself, and most of the time I woke up anyway. These are situations which, it's just, you cannot help. You have to be there and do it. And so he still could go out. He was good on his feet, but he didn't tremble. Also, he had metastasis in the part of the brain which regulates the balance, but he still could walk. But with all these bottles around, and I had to help him because it was heavy, this bottle, and anyway. So he was sitting outside. We have a roof, you know it now, a roof, and there we had a sofa, and he was sitting there. And the days before he had guests, but to see him, but I realized that it was a little bit tiring for him. But still, he wanted to go to a cafe, take the last cappuccino, which I know now, and so he tried to be as normal as possible. And the day when he died, in the morning I had to pay a bill and went away. He told me, "You have done a lot for me," or something. Or I learned a lot by you, something like that. And I said, "I did for you too, from you." And so I came back, and he went outside, and it was fine. Another friend came, and he talked about his brother in these bad conditions. And Mark said, he told me again, but our friend Giovanni maybe hasn't heard yet. He remembered his brother who had emphysema. And when he talked with him about death, which obviously nobody in the family did before, to tell him, how is it for you? You know, that's a terminal illness, and do you fear death? And the brother said, "I don't fear death, but I fear to run out of breath." And then he said, "Mark, and that's exactly the situation in which I am now." And a short time later, maybe half an hour later, he had this breathlessness attack. And then I held him, he had his head against me, and I held him, and normally he could recover. He sort of recovered, but not really. And then it took not even a minute, and he fell over and was dead. So surprisingly, although we knew that it would happen, but it was a complete surprise that it happened in this way, and without, thanks God, without needing to lie in bed and all these horrible things which you had to face with Lilian, And, I think he did it for me. He sort of decided that it was time now to go and not to cling on life until it would be a burden, a real heavy burden for himself and for me too. And I sort of am really grateful that he did that. Now I'm crying, for me at the end, because it was hard, and it could have been harder. And I would have been in the same situation as Mihai, but without having a mother, without having a sister, and without having anybody to be able to really support me. So he did the right thing to do that. Also, it was sort of a oops, sort of a shock. Yeah, and unfortunately, he couldn't see you anymore. He was so desirable in all these years to have a more close contact with you, and it sort of didn't happen, and it was really a shame.
Yeah.
Because he loved you both very much. With Lilian, obviously, they had... after the separation from the family, he had found, and Lilian has found with him, a way to be together. And with you, it seemed to have been a little bit more difficult. But he was so happy when he saw you and the funeral of Lilian, And sometimes the bad things are good for something too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How was it for you then to see him after the long time?
I think that I think I told you a little bit, but I'll say again. But that is actually a pleasant memory for me as well. And that, you know, finally, that I was given the space, given the conditions, I could uncontroversially engage my father in a family setting, where, you know, wherein, with my mother present, you know, not always, not something that's been possible. And so in that space, and during those days around the funeral, and so what was remarkable to me about my father was that, you know, there had been so much distance between us for so long. It was a relief and a delight to be reminded, or to just know, maybe even for the first time, how kind and easygoing and just sort of even just caring of someone in a relation, in a conversation, and just easy and not scary, and not sort of these narratives that, you know, go on in families when there's been a divorce and when there's been broken relationships. And so it just wasn't, you know, everything that you're worried about in your mind, just wasn't the case. That my father was nice and easy to talk to, and friendly and caring, and just gentle, and all these things that felt really good, and was really nice to know, very nice to know. And I had, you know, that experience, and me myself, like I was really strong during her final weeks, and I was really strong during the funeral, and I was really strong. But, you know, months later, after, and I was feeling really capable to handle things. But, you know, months later, as time passed, and going back to my life in San Francisco, I did, you know, I lost that feeling of confidence and that feeling of capability to negotiate family. I had to, you know, I had to hide out for a while. Yeah.
It's also understandable, no, that in the first time after these very intense experiences, there's sort of the endorphins coming up, and you make it, and then slowly you come down to earth again, and then all the, let's say, the preoccupations and all the thoughts come in and mix you up. I can really understand that.
Yeah. And so, yes. And so, I had faced it, but and I had come out stronger, but there was just a lot of collateral damage. I mean, I had to kind of, build myself up for a couple years after Lilian died. I had to, build myself back up to joining society again, almost. But that's not so much having, I think, that was more, sort of, it was the loss that I had gone through, but it was also just things that I was going through personally. But it took a few years to get back to feeling myself.
Mm-hmm. So you are already burdened by your profession to always care for other people. What are you doing for self-care? For not to be overwhelmed too much by this giving.
Yeah, that is a struggle, and so I'm, and I haven't always done very well. And so, you know, and there's some self-care I practice, which may or may not, I think is useful and also not useful. Which is, you know, I do sort of extract and avoid situations that I feel will, I'm sorry, can you give me the question again? I kind of got distracted.
What sort of self-care you are doing to be able to do this profession, which is very much also sucking your energies, no?
Yeah, yes, it's very rewarding working with my students, but it is also, it's a constant output of my care. And so I haven't always had the best self-care, but, you know, it is definitely about a lot of it is taking time for myself and not feeling obligated to expend energy in places that the places that I don't want to. And I am really, I had to learn about who to let into my life if things were going to be sustainable for me. So if I were going to continue being a teacher, that I couldn't take a partner or carry on with someone who was going to demand a lot of me or need a lot of my caretaking. And so that's taken some time to figure out. You know, I am really lucky right now to have someone in my life that sees how hard I work and really, really strives to make up that difference for me, and really strives to make me feel cared for and to take things off my plate. And so right now, I mean, and that, and really just being smart enough to recognize that in someone, and cherish that in someone, is sort of the growth I had to do myself. And so really continuing to work on myself in so that I continue to make healthy decisions, and where I don't impact or bring any more unnecessary stress, and so that I'm taking care of myself so I can still be here to keep doing the work for the kids and the families. Because that's very rewarding to me. It's a big part of my energy, and I want to be able to continue doing it. But I won't be able to continue do it if I, on top of the hard work, complicate my life too much, or invest my energy in places where it's not going to be rewarding to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mihai, we're glad that you are back. We were discussing the question, how was that for in the moment of death, and how was it afterwards for you? And Claire already went into the benefits for her life, what she has learned out of the experience taking care for Lilian. So if you want to go with that.
Certainly. I was offline for some technical reasons, but glad to be back. First, to your previous question, how was it the moment of death? And Lilian's experience and Claire and mine experience, Lilian deteriorated pretty slowly over the last literally month and a half, to where it was caring for her took full-time attention from 3 people. It was me, Claire, and my mom, and other family members would also bring meals. So it was 100%, basically would take all the time, almost non-stop all day long. So it was a very emotionally and physically draining process. In a way, it allowed us to grieve the loss through taking care of her, because part of her was already lost. Lilian couldn't speak, she couldn't do things on her own. So taking care of her was already part of the grieving process, and but it was also physically draining. So this, so we almost we were all so engaged in it that it almost felt like it would never end, to where it when the nurses were saying that any day now, it still took more than a week till it finally happened, and it's almost seemed unbelievable that it might even come soon. Lilian seemed to have a strong heart that just kept going. So, in a way, the moment that she passed, it was emotional because the whole family was there. We also got a pastor. Her cousin also said a few words, who is a pastor. But in a way, it came as a relief. And I know this may sound surprising, but we knew that she was already uncomfortable at that point. She was been confined to a bed for more than a week, and for us it was emotionally and physically draining. So when the thing that everybody's been expecting finally happens, it came as a sort of emotional relief in a way. Now, that doesn't mean it wasn't. I mean, to Claire's point, I was also feeling a clarity in the moment. As in, it wasn't. Caring for her gave us time to view what was coming. So it's almost like it was a soft landing onto the other world. It wasn't as much as a shock as it was probably for you, Heidi, when Mark was still okay one day and then the next day he just suddenly passed. That it wasn't the same way for us. And I've compared at least for me personally, the process of caring for somebody with terminal cancer to I associated with how it probably is to go to war, even if I've never been in a war or no, that's the right association. But to me, it's you're going into a battle that in a way you will lose in terms of what's going to be left after the battle. So to Claire's point, there is a sort of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, out of that you come up a different person. And for me, it was a more experienced person. Well, having experienced somebody very close to you die makes you realize that mortality is a lot more palpable and a lot closer to life than we'd like to many times think, or than the way society portrays life and death. So I've in a way felt afterwards a sense of, okay, now I can take care of myself a little better. Now I know that we are on this planet for not indefinite times, and I think I've become just a more, maybe even more cautious person. So I think the whole experience does take a little bit of your innocence away, because I guess as we grow through life, as you start as children, you start far away from the thought of death, and you have the ideas that everything is going to be positive and going to have a happy ending and everything's going to go according to plan. All this experience is just more grounding, and you become more of a wise person, at least in my case, or you become more of a person that thinks like everything can pass, or so.
Yeah. Is it also for you that you know now how to handle better your time and not waste your time, like Claire said? That she doesn't want to spend her time on, let's say, on people or on things which are not really of your highest values, let's say.
I'd like to think so. It certainly puts things in perspective more, and I since I become more preoccupied with, well, how can I first, having experienced this, try and give more to society and maybe give my knowledge to somebody else. And so I've one year I fundraised for the American Cancer Society. I've been meaning to volunteer more, and I have, with different degrees of success. But at the same time, it's from an emotional point of view or relationship point of view, it's made me a bit more fearful, and that maybe the post-stress traumatic part, a bit more fearful of being in a relationship. So right now, even if I know that being in a relationship was the happiest period of my life, and it was very fulfilling, and it also set a very high standard for what a fulfilling relationship is. Now I find that it can be scary to get close to somebody. In a way, my subconscious brain, the animal brain, says, well, it was last time we got really close to somebody, it hurt. So to me, I found myself that I need to nurture those fears that were born out of the traumatic experience.
Yeah, but you didn't make a vow to be alone all your life, I hope?
No.
No, I have not. No.
That's good.
Lilian and I did talk about how my life would be after she would pass, and I was able to share, and she even said at first, "You'll probably have another family," and I do want a family. I'd like to. The ultimate goal, I think, would be nice to have children and a family, not just children.
Yeah.
And find somebody that's a good partner and an exciting partner, and do things together. So, yes, I have not vowed to be celibate, or
yeah, and
Lilian demanded that.
Yeah.
I stay celibate and loyal, but
yeah. I think when the time is coming, then you will find what you need when you have had your time to realize or to elaborate all what you have lived through. And I definitely think your both experiences, but especially yours, is much more, much more intense than I have lived. I had only these 3 months. I before also was with my mother, but only for 3 weeks or something before she died, and with other people, but never so close. And with Mark, it was 3 months, and you had 2 years, and that's quite a bit, And I think it will take relatively longer. And so I do really wish that you will come up to life and enjoy a partnership and a family very soon as you are ready. But before we end, and I first want to thank you that you have done that, because it's not, it's, I asked several people to share about past lovers or partners, and they were not ready to share. And it takes some courage and some, willing to give out the experience to other people to do that. So then for the last question I would like to ask you is, what could you say to people who are in a similar situation and maybe tempted to let their people stay in a hospital or hospice, or keep them at home? What would you say? What they could do, should do, might consider to do from your experience? What, with other words, what could be a benefit for them to enter into this really difficult period of their lives and go through it? What makes it worthwhile?
I guess I can start. Well, if we think about from realistic point of view, it's probably 1 in 2 people will have to deal with cancer in one form or another, and it's a very scary diagnostic. I found it personally. I liked to be informed on the topic, so I've always searched more information about the what was developing and about the disease. I wanted to know what the reality is, and though it's a very scary diagnostic, at the same time, more and more cancer survivors are on the planet. So one piece of advice I would say to somebody who's in that situation is just get informed. Don't be afraid to ask the doctors difficult questions, important questions. Don't be afraid to challenge your doctor's reasoning. Don't be afraid to ask for a second opinion.
Oh, are we frozen again? No, I'm frozen, maybe.
Being informed for my partner will do best, and what gave me meaning, and I felt like that's the best way I can help somebody in need, because that's really what a human needs, that needs support, both morally but also support for the day-to-day. Another thing I would say is don't be afraid or ashamed to ask for help. It's something that I found harder a bit to do, maybe because of the stoic upbringing or values, but there are limits to what we all can do. So if somebody's offering to bring you a meal, just take the offer. It was actually very rewarding to see friends come over with cooked meals, and it was friends from grad school, friends from past life, and by past life I mean somebody maybe you haven't seen in a while. It was very rewarding for both Lilian and me to reconnect with somebody you haven't talked even sometimes in a while, and see that people are thinking about you, people are supporting, and it gave Lilian a lot of strength and also meaning and power to fight through. As to whether to to go into hospice or not, I think, or in a hospital, that's a deeply personal decision. I resisted going to hospice, thinking that would be, and by hospice I mean going into an actual physical building that offers hospice care. I resisted that because I felt it has a negative connotation. It removes you from, I felt like it would remove Lilian from the comfort of her home. However, there was a point when Lilian, the doctors would recommend hospice care, and even Lilian says, let's go to hospice. And it's when she said it that I understood that she was ready to move to hospice care, and we were lucky enough. And by the way, I think most modern medicine services offer hospice care at home, because that's what we end up doing. We would have a nurse come in, a nurse that's experienced in end of life care, come in into our home. They gave us a hospital bed that allows it to be lifted up or down, and it's got mechanical parts that are just easier to operate with somebody who's ill. So, and I don't think that that's just in the United States. I have a feeling that this hospice care at home is offered in other countries as well. But what I think what the best course of action is probably specific to each case. Certainly, I could have not provided, if I was by myself, I could have not watched over Lilian 24 hours a day and offer her a good end of life care by myself at home. It was the only way it was possible. We had professional medical care come to our house, and we were paying for, while Lilian was still able to be somewhat independent, but with somebody would come, we would pay to take care of her during the day, and then eventually there was all the family members that would stay on duty. It was Claire, it was Mommy, it was Grandma Pat, that would take turns to take care of her, and I know if everybody has access to those type of resources, so it's hard to say what's the best choice, other than somebody has to make a decision.
Thank you. It's also, in my opinion, it should be more provided help to the family members who are willing to do that, because they lose their job, at least in that time. They cannot earn money and so on. It should be, in my opinion, a sort of a reward for taking care for your family members, because, you save the state a lot of money.
Certainly. Yep.
So maybe we come there sooner or later. That might be a valuable thing to fight for. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now to you.
Yeah. I think that, I would definitely deeply agree that that I think that there probably is a preference and a lot of advantages to being able to have your end of life care at home, but I think that would have to be a deeply personal decision based on, not every individual is going to have a loving, healthy partner there to assume primary responsibility. Sometimes we're looking at, in different family dynamics, whomever, it might be difficult and to find the place and have the space to do that. And so, I know that I was unable to qualify for FMLA, which is family medical leave, because this was my sister and not a parent, spouse, or child. And so there's sort of there's this, and then you have to be the reality of what practically can your support system accomplish, right? You know, different dynamics, different families aren't going to be able to get it done. And I don't think that that's a failure on anybody's part. I just think that that's a difficult and practical conversations that families need to have. And you do have instances where someone in your family's ill and the children aren't able to do it, and there isn't a partner to do it. And so, we're taking care of our uncles or our siblings and these sort of things. But I do think that in general, there's a lot of advantages to dying at home and being at home. And not only is it cheaper, but I think that if you get that attendant care and that nurse to come at home, I think that there's a higher quality of the experience. And I think that just in general, that to understand and to get used to the idea that dying is a very human thing, and that we need to humanize the experience and continue to value this human up until the very end, no matter, and value their wishes.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to add to that, Mark always wanted to be present when he's dying. He wanted to live the experience because it's probably the greatest experience or the most important experience we have in our lives. And he really managed to be awake and aware up to the last second. So I hope he found what he wanted to find there as a life experience, final life experience. So I thank you very much. And for who is watching, I'm preparing a book, an ebook about Mark and his family and his worldviews and whatever, with stories and testimonials. And if you subscribe for our series, then you will get a copy for free. And if you want to write a little bit more about Lilian, I'm happy to put it also into the ebook. So
that'd be great.
Thank you very, very, very much.
It's good to see both of you. We're gonna go eat some lunch now.
Yeah. Okay. Bye. Bye. Have a nice Sunday.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.